Well, I think the hardest thing is getting access to a way to contribute. People need to have mechanisms available that they can use to put the money aside and to keep it safe and secure and earn a decent return.
One of the key challenges is figuring out how to collect very small payments very regularly over a long period of time. Because when you're looking at low-income people, the amounts that they have to pay are so small that it's sometimes the transaction cost for the financial institution of collecting that money is higher than the amount that someone can pay. So
first is the labor structure. The structure of the labor market, especially for the informal sector. The current conventional pension arrangement cannot work for them because we have to take into account their peculiar nature. The second is the issue about the low income that they get, which is irregular. So they can't be able to contribute on a monthly or an agreed periodic arrangement. So their contribution has to be sort of not really monthly and again not very regular. And then the rules should be slightly different as the rules we provide for the formal employees. And then the high labor mobility causes a big problem. People move from one place to another. And that's another major effect.
The main challenge, I think, it is this question of how do we observe, how do these people that do have some income-generating activities are observed, and we are able to capture their activity and observe what their income is in order for them to contribute as well. So I think that's where the challenge comes into. How we generate channels in which they can contribute to their own pension system, or you can set up a pension system that targets this population.
Really I'm kind of think of those as two different challenges. One, the making it simple and easy, the communications that we're creating, the plans, the systems that we're designing is the one challenge, and then the related challenge is identifying somehow how do we get in the head of that person out there who's going to have to understand these communications or use this plan, figure out how to invest their money, whatever it might be.
Yes, there is a big challenge for our country because we have a high informal economy, and at the same time you have a high level of immigration. That means that most of the Albanian citizens living abroad, they are working in the black economy, and they are not covered by the social security system in our country and in country where they are living. And so, when they get older, they will turn back to us, and they are asking a benefit because they will find lack of money to live.
The first important issue is to identify how are we going to finance these pensions. First, from the private sector or from the public sector. From private sector, the issue clearly is to find a way to help them save for retirement. This is going to be kind of complicated in the case of informal sector, low-paid workers. So you need necessarily to complement this issue with public transfers, probably a non-contributory pension system, well defined, in order to complement, in order to get this universal coverage. The problem is that you need to have a balanced fiscal budget, and this is a challenge for many emerging economies. So the other area is political, because you always can find a way to provide some kind of universal coverage. The next problem is adequacy. Is this level of pensions going to be enough for them? From a political point of view, politicians consider this pension or transfer that you're going to provide enough. What is going to be the reaction of the politicians? You can generate a vicious circle in terms of increasing and paying more pensions that probably your fiscal balance could manage. So I think that those issues needs to be clearly understood in every or each reality where you plan to develop this issue. Not only to, I can only consider a third area is how to make it easier to save and also to receive the transfers in order to improve saving of financial inclusion pension. And in this area, I think that is very important the role played by digital solutions. No?
As we know, Mexico has a huge informal sector, and people come in and out of the informal sector, in the formal sector substantially. People in the informal sector that come out and can continue to contribute even at a micro level so that they can actually make sure that they can guarantee their own future, their own pension in the future.
Well, I think there are big challenges in reaching informal workers and finding cost-effective ways to engage with them and get them involved and develop trust so that their money will stay in the savings vehicles and so that the final goal of support in old age will be achieved.
I think technology is essential, and we need to run a lot of pilots actually at this point because the experience base is very, very low. So we need to try out a lot of different systems that, such as there's an experiment going on in Mexico now where people can pay when they go to the convenience store, and you're asked, would you like to make a pension contribution? So we need those kinds of experiments to see where people are really going to respond.
So there are two issues. One is, and actually that's what we observe in Chile and in other countries as well. Some of the people now are more visible because of the new technology. So now you can observe, because of the more use of mobile phones or more use of electronic payments, now you can observe much more of their activity. So that's how there are new points of contact with this informal population that you can use in order for them to participate, and they can use that as a part of fomenting their own savings. But on the other hand, there are still people who are poor and who do not have the ability to save, or it's already too late. They are over 50, over 60, they are already in old age, and you don't have enough time to build a pool of assets for them to rely on in retirement. So for that part of the population, there's this other policy that we have observed in the region, in Latin America, especially since the 2000s, which is the provision of social pensions, non-contributory pensions that can provide or that can serve to prevent poverty in old age. So I think there are these two issues that are complementary. On one hand, non-contributory pensions, and on the other hand, more extension of contributory pensions through new channels.
One thing that we have actually used even in Kenya is leveraging on ICT. So we came up with a platform whereby people in the informal sector, they can invest through mobile phones. And the kind of contribution is like 25 pence US dollars. And the contribution, that's per day. But again, you can contribute at any time, the amount you want. And then you can also, the withdrawal system also is easy. And what our experience has shown that people actually are contributing more than that. Because after the end of the day, the artisans, people in the informal sector can easily put money on a daily basis, something small, using their phones. Then the other thing that we have to do is also to get them on board is to try and have financial literacy education. We are coming up with a curriculum which will cover people right from grade 6 to tertiary colleges, whereby this will be infused within their curriculum so that people can learn about pensions, insurance, basically financial markets.
The work that we do focuses mainly on operating efficiency of pension systems around the world. So it doesn't relate so much with engaging with the members and getting them involved, But what we have learned that is very critical from the work we've done with pension systems around the world is that it's very important to reduce unnecessary costs and optimize the value that's generated so that the beneficiaries will realize the value from the investment they've made long term in their old age.
A lot of times we talk about education, we want to educate people, and I always feel like that's a very difficult thing to educate people, to bring them from where they are today and make them into give them enough expertise to make smart choices. So
I think we need to include fintech solutions into the whole realm of pensions. Fintech solutions have been developing in the banking industry, but pensions is starting to very slowly come about. I think that if we include technology solutions, everybody, at least there's about 84 million cell phones, smart cell phones in Mexico itself. So I think that that's a huge opportunity for us to use technology and to use that technology to actually bring the services, the financial services down, even to provide pensions coverage to the entire population.
I think that it's important to start with a short pilot program, see how it works, try to learn and to take the best lessons in order to improve and escalate in the future that programs in order to be nationwide, as your best scenario. So pilot programs, evaluate field experiments, I think that is important. The second aspect that I think that could be immediately incorporated in these pilot programs is the use of financial solutions. I mean, the use, for example, of cell phones. Cell phones have a very high penetration in emerging economies. So people in the informal sector, low-income collectives, have developed experience using and they trust these devices. So we can trust to find solutions in order to take advantage of the cell phones, in order to provide alternative products, in order that they can participate. We have seen in different countries how this digital solution has been helping in financial inclusion. The next step is how to design products for pensions. So I think that we can learn from the experience from financial inclusion, the short-term perspective, to develop long-term issues related to retirement.
We will encourage people to participate in the voluntary private schemes. And at the same time to create incentives to participate in the compulsory public scheme, especially for some categories, for some groups like rural areas, the self-employed in agriculture, where people who have small farms, and when they produce things only for their consume and they don't have access to the market and they don't sell so much to have money, and to provide to them a special rate of contributions, and the other part of contributions to be subsidized by the government in order to create the possibility to be participant in the scheme. And at the same time to create incentives to participate in a voluntary private scheme, creating fiscal incentives, like
raising awareness among the population that this is important, and also that there are opportunities available to start building some money for retirement are important. Even in developed countries, a lot of people don't understand that, or they're not motivated to do something about it. And so, getting that awareness built is important, and knowing that there's a regulator and supervisor there that's going to help protect the security of their benefits and their accumulations is important. Is working with industry to to actually take an interest in the lower income market and do something to address it is important. The industry in most countries starts at the top end and works their way down. So they deal with big businesses, they deal with wealthy people. Those are the entities and the people that recognize that they need to do something and they've got the money to do it, and so they're perhaps easier targets and more profitable than trying to work your way down the market. But recognizing that if you have a large base of people, even if you don't make much profit per unit off of them, if there are lots of units, it can benefit you. From the supervisor's point of view, it's not just the potential benefit, but you have to be looking at the risks as well. And so certainly you don't want to turn a blind eye to that. I mean, you've got the risk of identity theft and people hacking in and taking other people's balances and putting the system into a halt if the controls aren't in place. So, you need to be aware of that and work through that. But you've also got to recognize that you can't stay with the techniques that have been used 100 years ago either. That manual records are sort of a thing of the past, and that the automation can help to make the operators in the system more efficient, keep the costs down, and still make a profit, but also to help in communicating with the customers as well, and help them understand how much they need to save, how much pension that's going to produce, what the risks are of different alternatives, and so there can be benefits in many ways from using the technology. Well, I think the book project will be very useful in bringing together numerous examples of what has been tried in various places and what worked and what didn't and why it did or didn't work. And so those reasons are not going to be the same in every country's situation. People are going to have to read the book and adapt to their own situation. But it certainly helps me in my work to have examples that can be used. I mean, even if you can describe the most reasonable approach that you could think of to take, people will look at that and say, well, yes, that makes sense, but who's tried it before, and has it worked or hasn't it? So having examples is always useful to have at hand, and provides evidence of what might or might not work in different situations. And I think so a lot of that's going to be in the countries section, but even in the topic section, I'm sure that there will be plenty of examples in there to illustrate the various issues and how they might be approached.
I think this book is a good opportunity because it will collect a lot of information from different countries and from different experiences that can create a really rich knowledge base. So you can find examples from Latin America, from Asia, from Africa, and those all these countries face challenges in terms of including more people in their pension systems, and they have maybe taken similar steps, or maybe you will find different examples, and depending on the situation and depending on the starting point of your own country, you can find a good example of what, or a good idea of what could help and you could try in other countries to improve coverage of pensions. So I think it's a good effort to put together all this knowledge, systematize the information, and try to bring examples that could be useful for policymakers in other countries as well.
I think it's an excellent effort to bring together the expertise from different countries, naturally seeing how different countries have been dealing with these issues, and what are the tools that we have in place so that we can actually use the different tools to provide a better service or a better pension, consequently a better pension for people to enjoy at old age. I think that the book is probably the starting point of a set of sort of rudimentary tools for micropensions that we need to build on to make sure that this financial inclusion, and including pension inclusion, and spread the coverage of the population to the rest of the population, and not just people who contribute to the formal sector.
Pension inclusion is a topic that is not talked about enough. And so it's very important to create the buzz, and I think the book project can do that because it brings many people together, it articulates the issues, and it's able to get the ear of the key people that should be involved.
Well, it's an incredibly important issue. Today, more than 1 billion excluded workers in the informal economy face the grim prospect of abject poverty in their old age. So it's something that society needs to do something about to avoid these long-term problems. So we're hoping that this will be a catalyst and a game changer to raise it on the agenda of policymakers.
I think for me and all of us, helping to illustrate this idea that there's just a whole different world of people out there that somehow need to work their way through these complicated systems and use them to their advantage. So it's just that learning about how everybody thinks about these things.
Main aspect, relevant aspect of the book is the comparative analysis. You can have different experiences, different ways how countries are tackling this problem. So you can find coincidence, difference, good and bad. So I think that this makes the book pretty relevant and worth to read it. This is the first. And secondly, now I think that we have interesting experience in the use of technology. So I think this issue is going to be also important to know how some economies very poor, in fact, are using these methods, are using these facilities in order to go one step further in pension inclusion. So I think that it's going to be very interesting and a good contribution for a global perspective.
I think that sharing experience and discussing, learning from each other, from different experiences from different countries, is a good thing, because we can take the best from each country and we better organize and better reform our system and better create possibility for our citizens to be covered and to have benefits from our social security system. At the same time, I think that the book will help even the policymakers, I mean the politicians who are in the same time even decision makers, to see what happened around in the countries similar to our country and with similar problems that we have, and to find a better solution for covering and for providing benefits to each other.
One is to create awareness. The roadshow will definitely create awareness going around places. And another thing about the book is it's going to show other experiences from other countries. And that experience can be shared among the members, basically globally.